Hi everybody, welcome back for another art class with Good Friend Art Studio. I'm Miss Carrie and we are going to make way for ducklings today. It is a book that's been around for a very long time. Oh, hang on. Hold on. Good Friend Art Studio. I'm Miss Carrie and we are going to... You don't want to hear me twice. There we go. Okay, so we're going to be making way for ducklings and reading a story that's been around for a very long time. Make Way for Ducklings is by Robert McCloskey, and he wrote this book in 1941. It is a super long time ago, but I bet that your grandparents can tell you that they read it to your parents when they were little, because it's a favorite and a classic book. So we're going to make some beautiful ducklings here following their mama duck. And I bet if you took a nature walk, you would see some ducks and some geese kind of doing the same thing because it's that time of year. So let's read Make Way for Ducklings and then we'll do our art project together. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard, so down they flapped. The next morning they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Duck, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts in the water, so the mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed onto the bake and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest here and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted at last that Mrs. Mallard had found a place suited for her. But... "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard in all a dither. "You'll get run over!" And when she caught her breath, she added, "This place is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing around, we'll have to look somewhere else." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. Then they looked into Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count her eggs to make sure they were all there. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, and then Cack, and then Lack, and Mack, and Knack, and Whack, and Pack, and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he would like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river looks like further on, so he set I'll meet you in a week at the public garden, he quacked over his shoulder. Take good care of the ducklings. Don't you worry, said Mrs. Mallard. I know all about bringing up children, and she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them how to walk in a line and come when they were called and keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, Come along, children, follow me. And before you could wink an eye, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they all swam behind her to the opposite bank. Then they waded on shore and waddled along until they came to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped across the road. Honk, honk went the horn-speeding cars. Quack went Mrs. Mallard, and she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking at them. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other the way the policemen do for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, There's a family of ducks walking down the street. Clancy said, Family of what? Ducks, yelled Michael. Send a police car, quick. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned down Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, Isn't it amazing? And the man who swept the street said, Well, now, ain't that nice? And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra little swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was a police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Right into Public Garden. Inside the gates, they all turned around to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. He's way over there. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they followed the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and they all go to sleep. See, look at them. The end. So, we're going to make some ducklings. Now, we're not going to make 8 ducklings because I don't think we have room on our paper for 8 ducklings. But we are going to make 3 little ducklings and 1 mama duck. So, let's get set up and I'll tell you about the supplies that we're going to be using and then we'll get started. Okay, we are going to start with some markers. So if you just have any old markers, they will do. And we're going to use a little paint today. If you don't have paint, that's okay. You can still use markers or crayons. But I have 1 or 2 different colors of blue. I have some green paint, some purple paint, some white paint, and some brown paint. So we're gonna use all of those, but again, don't worry if you've got crayons, if you've got oil pastels, if you've got markers, all of this will be just fine. And then I'm gonna use my oil pastels. I've shown you these a couple of times before. They're just like crayons, they're just a little bit slicker. So crayons would work as a substitute for oil pastels if you don't have those. And we're gonna use a whole bunch of colors. Okay, let's start it off. I'm gonna scoot my board a little bit closer to you so you can see the details. So let me scoot it and then make sure that you can see the whole thing in the camera before I start drawing. Let's see, I think that's good. Nope, hold on. There we go. Okay. All right, we're going to start with a blue marker or a blue crayon, and we're going to draw a stream. And the stream is going to start up in the top, and it's going to wiggle its way down all the way to the bottom opposite corner. So I'm going to keep adjusting it until I get it just right. So I'm going to start up in this top corner, not the really pointed part, but a little bit closer in, and I'm going to make a wavy line. And I'm going to wiggle it down here. So I would say you have about the length of your fingers down here. See how much space I have from the bottom edge to the top there? And on this side, about the width of my hand. My hand's a little bit bigger than yours, but that's okay. If you can use that as a measuring stick, then you'll know where to put your wavy line. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. And we're going to start a little bit further down on this edge and wiggle it down. And our stream is going to get a little bit wider as it comes down this way. That's just because this part is supposed to look a little bit closer to us than this part. And so when you're doing art, a lot of times you make things smaller when they're farther away and larger as they come closer to you. All right, we're ready to jump into some painting. So I'm going to start with my blues. I have a regular blue color that will serve as our base for our river. Or it's really not a river, it's just a little tiny stream. So I'm going to squirt some of that out. And I also have a favorite color that I'm going to add. It's okay if you don't have this. This is like a turquoise. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter. So if you don't have turquoise, you could also mix some white with your blue and add a light blue that way. So I'm going to put a little bit of white on my plate just so that I can show you that mixture. All right, as you're getting your paints ready, you're going to want to have some water to rinse your paintbrush when we switch colors, and also a paper towel because I feel like I always get messy when I paint. So I like to have a paper towel handy. Okay, so these are the three colors that I'm going to start with, and I'm using a paintbrush that's a little bit bigger. When I'm painting a larger space, I try to go with a bigger paintbrush. When I'm painting a smaller space, I might switch to a smaller one. So if you have a larger paintbrush, I would start with that. And we're just going to fill in our stream. And my brush strokes are going in the direction of the way the water would flow down the river. I think that's important because you're going to see all of these lines that my brush is making, and it'd be kind of funny if they went up and down. It would look like the water was running in a crazy direction. So we really don't want that. We always want to paint in the direction that our water is flowing. So this is just the regular blue. If I wanted to lighten the regular blue, then I would take some white and just mix a little white in there. And that's a nice sky blue color, but I think that would look really pretty in our stream too. So I'm going to mix some of that in. little bit more up here, and then I'll switch colors again. Okay, so see how I've almost filled in the entire stream? We're gonna do some overlapping. So I'm gonna take that turquoise color that I showed you, and I'm gonna add that in and just kind of mix it in where I see little white spots. We're going to just keep on covering the white spots on our river and adding more and more colors. And that's gonna just really make it look pretty at the end. There we go. All right, now that we have the blue of our river, I'm going to pour a little bit of green and a little bit of purple onto my plate. When you're looking at a stream or a river, you can see through it, and a lot of times you can see the green stuff that's growing underneath. There's all sorts of plants that grow down at the bottom of a river, and because the water is pretty clear, you can see those. And so the color on a river or a stream is not just blue. It's gonna have some other colors in it too. So watch how much I'm gonna put in. It's not gonna be a ton, but I am gonna mix just a little bit of green here and there. And it might mix with the blue that's on your paper already, and that's okay. I like it kind of mixing right there on the paper. I think that looks nice. Okay, so a little bit of green. And then I'm gonna clean my paintbrush. So I'm gonna swish it around in my jar of water. And then I'm gonna pat it dry on my paper towel to soak up that extra water, because if you use a wet paper towel, or I'm sorry, a wet paintbrush to paint with, your paint is gonna get soggy and runny, and it's not gonna be as good as you want it to be. So now that I have a clean, dry paintbrush, I'm gonna go back in. I'm gonna add a little bit of purple in my stream too. And this is just shadows that you might see down in the bottom of your stream. There'd be a lot of shadows right along the edge because there's all sorts of rocks and twigs and things under there. So I'm gonna put a lot of my purple along the edges here. Maybe just a little bit down in the middle. All right. All right, I'm gonna clean my paintbrush again. And we're going to make something called cattails. I love finding cattails when I'm walking around a stream. Cattails are a type of plant that have like a fuzzy little hot dog shaped tail, and it's fuzzy. It's fun to touch those. So cattails kind of stick along the water's edge. They really like the water. So a lot of times you'll see them growing there. We're gonna make some cattails, and they're pretty easy to make. And I'm gonna use green paint, but if you have a smaller brush, you can switch to a smaller brush. If you don't have a smaller brush, let me show you what you can do. You can paint with just the corner of your brush, and it makes a smaller line than if you paint with the full width of the brush. So a lot of times I'll tell my students, if they're trying to do a thin mark, is to paint with the tiptoes of the brush. Don't smush it down. Don't smush it down like that. You just want to paint with the tiptoes, like your paintbrush is doing ballet on their toes. Okay, so I'm going to take my smaller brush and dip it in my green paint, and I'm going to do a few little cattail plants. Let's start on the top side of our stream, and I'm going to start right down here at the top edge of my water, and I'm going to go whoop and lift it up. Let's do another one. Whoop. So I start, and then I press down lighter, 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 and then I lift it up at the end. And that makes them kind of come to a point when you lift it. It's fun to do. And it already looks like a plant, and we didn't even do that much. So let's do another one. Now that we've done one, I bet we can fit another one up here. Let's see. This one will have to be smaller, but we'll still fit it in. So we'll do one plant. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little plants. The next one only has 3 because it's kind of squeezed in there. We're going to do a really big one right here. So let's start with our tallest one. It's going to start at the bottom of the page and it's going to swoop almost all the way up to the river's edge. We'll do a little smaller one right next to it. There's number 3. I think we're going to do 6. Can we fit 6? Let me try. 4, 5, 6. So see how some of these are kind of bending over. All right, I think that looks really neat. All right, and we haven't even done the fun part. So let's clean our paintbrushes. I'm swishing it in the water, and then I'm going to squeeze it dry on my paper towel. Just give it a little squeeze to soak up that extra water. And that way you can also tell if it's clean, because you'll see there's just a tiny bit of green coming off, but that's okay. I'm going to pour a little bit of brown paint. So again, you can use your pastels, your markers, your crayons if you're not painting along, and you can just make the same shapes by drawing them. So same brush, brown paint, and let's add a few cattails to the mix. Let's see, I'm going to do one that's sitting at the end of this one. So it almost looks like a hot dog. Almost. It's a little bit shorter than a hot dog. We'll put one there. Let's do another one at the end of this one. I don't want to squeeze them and bunch them up too much. So let's see, maybe I'll do a smaller one up here because that one's a little bit further away. And then we need to add some down here. Now I'm going to do some overlapping. So this tallest one, I want to stretch it way up. So it's going to go up like this and overlap the river. So this makes it look like it's up close to us in front of the river because we've overlapped it. Let's do another one. Number 2, we're going to do one more. Let's do this one right here. There. Okay, I think that looks really good. We're going to switch and work on our ducks for a little bit. And so I'm going to put this aside and let the painting part dry just a minute while I switch easels. And then we're going to use a different piece of paper for our ducks. So if you have a small or a piece of copy paper just that you would get from the printer, that's the size paper that we need. So let me put one easel down and I'll pick up another one. And we can work on our ducks. There we go. All right, let me tape it up for you. All right, we're gonna fit 4 ducks on this page. One is gonna be Mama Duck, so she's gonna be a little bit bigger. And then we're going to make 3 smaller ones. So they're not going to be in the same spots that they're gonna be in the river. We're just gonna kind of squeeze them all on and then cut them out. So let's start with Mama Duck, and we're gonna put her way down in this bottom corner so that she doesn't take up too much space. We wanna fit all 4 ducks on one page. It's a challenge. Let's see if we can do it. So Mama Duck has a body that looks kind of like a fish hook or an upside down candy cane or a backwards letter J. You'll see what I mean. Watch this. I go down and curve it up. And it's a little bit smaller than my hand. I still have to add her head on, but it's a little bit smaller than my hand. So give that a try. Go down and around. And then we're going to add on a head. So at this top part of my drawing, I'm going to make what kind of looks like a backwards C. Down and back. See how I added that on to the top? So she's turning around to keep an eye on her baby ducks. So let's give her a beak. There's a little bump, and then it comes out like that. All right. Now we're going to do the back side of her. So I'm going to do another backwards J, down and around. And then I'm going to give her a back, like big feathers on her back. So it's going to do a rainbow shape to connect her neck to her tail. Just like that. And that's the outline for Mama Duck. So she could really be any color that you want her to be. I'm going to have her be blue and orange, just because I think that's a pretty combination. So I'm going to give her some stripes. We're going to start with stripes going down her neck and down her body. And maybe she's got just a little bit on her head. And then I'm going to switch to blue. And I'm going to do stripes in between those orange stripes. I'm also going to color in her wings this color too. All right. If you can find a black marker, you could do it with other color, but I think black looks nice. We're going to do a small circle for her eye, and then do a smaller black circle inside for her iris, her colored part of her eye. And then I'm going to give her a couple little eyelashes. Makes her look like a pretty female duck when you give her eyelashes. And then let's color, excuse me, let's color in her beak. I'm going to color in her beak yellow. Okay, duck number 1 done. Let's squeeze in another duck over here. I'm going to do a baby duck, and it's going to be the same shape as Mama Duck. It's just going to be smaller. So let's see if we can do the exact same thing one more time, but just a little bit smaller. So the J, backwards J shape is first. And then remember we did the head. And we'll give the baby a smaller beak. And then we do the neck to the tail and the little back. All right, let's do a circle for the eye, little black circle for the eyeball. And just to make this one look different from the mama, I'm not going to do eyelashes. This time I'm going to do just a little eyebrow, so that it looks just a little bit different from its mother. Okay, what color shall we make this one? I think I'm going to do orange on the back feathers. And maybe this one will be a yellow duck. Sometimes ducks tend to look all the same, and they probably would be looking more brown and try to blend in with their nest, but this is art, and with art you can make your own decisions about colors, and I like things bright and colorful, so I'm not going to make them natural looking. I'm going to make them rainbow, pretty colors. All right, let's see. Baby duck needs a beak, and I think the beak's going to be purple. Why not? Okay, 2 ducks down. We have 2 more to go. So let's do duck number 3. Duck number 3 and 4, they're gonna look a lot alike too. One's gonna be a little bit bigger than the other, just like these two. So let's jump up here and we'll do duck number 3 and 4 up here. Let's start with a circle for the head. And then this one's going to be facing this way. So let's give it a beak. And we're going to do 2 lines coming down for its neck. An oval for the body. We're going to make a smile shape. This is going to turn into its back wing. And then a little point for its tail feathers. All right, let's color that one in. See, I'm still going to use yellow for the beak. I think that's a good beak color for this one. And this duck, I'm going to make this duck red. You don't really see red ducks, but I think it's pretty. And it'll look really good against the stream that we've already colored. So let's see, I'm going to make the head red and I'm going to make the body red. Let's go ahead and do the tail feathers that color too. All right, now let's go back and add some more yellow to this one. I'm going to color in the neck. I'm going to color in the back. And then just to make it extra pretty, I'm going to add another color on top. So maybe I'll do some zigzags along the neck. And then on the back feathers, I'm just going to do some stripes to make it look like it's got different color feathers on there. And the last thing we need to add to this duck is an eye. So I'm going to do the circle, the little circle inside for the eyeball. And then I'm going to do just a little eyebrow, a little arch on top. All right, duck number 3, done. We have one more duck to go. I'm going to do my last duck with a purple outline just for fun. And I have to squeeze him in. He may have to be a little tilted to squeeze in. Let's see, where can I fit him? I'm going to go right here. All right, so he's going to be a little bit at a funny angle, but we've done this before. It's the same shapes. So there's the head. There's the beak. I'm going to jump down and do his body. There's his neck, his wing, and his tail. So he really is. He's sitting sideways. But he still looks good. So let's color him in. I'm going to pick yellow. You can pick whatever colors you want, but for this little duck, I'm going to make him yellow. So he's going to have a yellow head and a yellow body. And then I'm going to do orange for his neck and his wing. And I'm going to color in his beak this color too. All right, let's see. Add some details. We'll do the same little zigzags that we did. I'm going to choose blue and then add those little stripes on his back. And he needs an eye, and then he'll be all done. There's his eye. There's his little eyeball. There's his little eyebrow. All right. we have our ducks. They're not in a row yet. So we're going to take this down and we're going to carefully cut these out. Now this is the part, if you don't love cutting, this part you might want to ask for a little bit of assistance just because the ducks' heads are a little tricky to get around. And I don't want you to, cut off a little duck's head. That would be sad. But I will say this, when you're cutting out, you shouldn't be afraid of it. You should just give it a try. So what I tell my students to do is I cut out a section first. I don't try to cut around the edges of my duck when I've got the whole paper attached. So once I have one duck kind of separated from the rest of the paper, then I can go nice and slow and cut very carefully around the edges of her without making a mistake. If you try to cut her out and you have this whole floppy piece of paper that's still attached, it can be hard to do. So even as a grown-up, I do that. I separate it and then I cut around the edges. All right, since Mama Duck is free, I'm going to get my glue stick and glue her on. I'm gonna flip her over. And by now, I think your paint is mostly done. It should be mostly dry. I'm going to put glue all over the back side. Make sure that you don't forget her beak, because you don't want her beak to fall off. Or stick up rather. It won't fall off, but it might stick up. So she's going to be the leader of the little duck line. Remember Mama Duck was leading and it was Jack, Cack, Whack, Mac, and 5 others. All right, so Mama Duck's at the head of the line. And then let me cut out my second one. All right, so I separated it from the rest of the paper. And I'm going to carefully cut around. There we go. Okay, duck number 2. I'm going to put it a little bit further behind, but I know I need to leave space for my last 2 ducks, so I think he's going to sit up here. And it's okay that he's covering up some things that are behind him. I like overlapping because it shows that there's distance, that the painting goes further back. I think that's really neat to layer things and overlap them. All right, duck number 3 looks just like Mama Duck. Remember we did a smaller version of Mama Duck? So I'm cutting out the baby duck that is, the same size as her, or the same shape as her. And I'm gonna glue all over the back side. Make sure I don't miss the beak or the tail. And let's see, that one will go right here. All right, one more baby duck to go. Okay. one's going to fit right there. Left him a little space. He's following the end. He's the end of the train, isn't he? Okay, so if you wanted to, you could add other things to your picture. You could go back in with oil pastels and add some shadows or some darker reeds. I'm taking a purple. Look what happens when I just add a little bit of purple. It kind of makes them stand out a little bit. Gives them a little bit of a shadow. So I kind of like that. And there would be all sorts of other things on the shoreline. So if you have your crayons out, you could add some other type of grass if you wanted to here and there so that it looks like there's a shoreline. Ooh, you could add, what if we added like a ladybug sitting on one of these? So I'm starting with my red and making a half circle. And then I'm gonna put just a little dot, black dot at the front of it, and then put some dots all along it. So it doesn't have to be really detailed. You can just add a few things here or there. If I really had a good spot, then I would add a dragonfly because you always see those around the ponds. Don't know if I have room. All right, I'm gonna give it a try. It may not be perfect, but that's okay. So for my dragonfly, I think I'm gonna take my black crayon just because it's kind of dark. There's a lot of stuff going on over here. I'm gonna do a head, and then I'm gonna do just sort of like a wiggly little body. It almost looks like a caterpillar because I don't have anything else on it. And then the difference between a dragonfly and a butterfly is the butterfly's wings are really big and they fill up the whole body, but the dragonflies come out and back in. And because it's sitting here on this, it would do it. You'd see both of the wings on the same side. And they are see-through. You can see some designs in them, so you might do a few little squiggles inside the dragonfly wings, but you wouldn't do too much to it. Maybe you might see their feet, but they're pretty small. So you could add a few more little critters to yours if you like, and just fill it up. Sometimes I even like to just add designs. What if I just did like a row of dots to fill up a section with pattern? That could look pretty too. So you can take the idea and then keep building on it and building on it to make it yours and make it look beautiful. So I'm excited to see yours. I can't wait to see what your ducklings look like and how you decided to color yours. And I will be back tomorrow with another art lesson. So I hope you had fun and have a good day. Bye, everybody.